Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am sitting in Temecula Valley with John McPherson, who is the master winemaker at South Coast Winery, which actually includes a few other brands, which we're going to let him explain. So, John, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us about South Coast Winery, Carter Estate, Carter Creek, the whole gamut.
Well, thank you, Allison. Carter Hospitality, as we're known, is the kind of umbrella group, and that encompasses South Coast Winery, and then our sister property across the street, which is Carter Estate, and then our other property in Texas down in Johnson City, which is Carter Creek Winery. And these are all resort properties with winemaking as one of the features. So besides, the usual trappings of a resort with hotel and spa and pool and restaurant, etc., we also have our winery. And property in Texas actually has a brewery as well, so a little bit covering both sides of the tracks.
Are you a master brewmaster?
I am not, but I know a good beer when I have one. So we've got our master brewer there, which he doesn't go by master brewer, he's just our brewer, Justin Zimmerman. Great guy, dynamite beers. He's got it dialed in down there.
Well, we know that winemakers love good beer, but we're going to stick with wine today. How do you differentiate South Coast Winery from, Carter? Like, if you can give a little synopsis of the two brands here in Temecula and what you're producing.
We, the unique thing about our property is that all of the grapes that we use in our wine production are coming off our estate vineyards. So we control growing, picking, winemaking, everything. It's cradle to grave, really. And, when you're vertically integrated like that, you have that ability to really, I think dial in aspects of what you're harvesting. And certainly Carter Estate is our pinnacle of wine. It's all about, the very best lots, which may, be only 5 or 6 barrels of something that we make. These things get earmarked for the Carter Estate program in the table wine aspect. And then that actual facility at Carter is all set up for Méthode Champenois wine production. So we do, hand picking of all of our fruit for that. It's various, we have a couple of different blocks of Pinot Noir and several different blocks of Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc, and all of this is what is being used for the sparkling wine production there. So it's hand-picked, whole cluster pressed, and then we, do the cuts as far as the different ties with the pressing lots. So we have, free run, early press, second press, etc., and then we'll go through and do our blend. So the Méthode Champenois is the key thing at Carter as far as sparkling. And then here at South Coast, of course, we kind of have a little bit different approach in respect to the wines that we're doing, because as a resort property, the owner recognized the fact, that's Jim Carter. Jim looked at it and said, we're going to have people coming from all over the world and all walks of life that enjoy wine, and I want them, when they come here, to have a wine that they can enjoy. So we do whites, we do reds, we do rosés, we do sparkling, we do fortified, and it's something that it's a little bit of everything. And me and my team, certainly the other winemaker Javier Flores and I, we have a huge appreciation of wine, and so we make Riesling and Gewürztraminer with the same amount of passion that we're making Viognier and Syrah with, and it's something that we recognize there's a consumer out there for everything, and you have to make it well. And so that's totally our thing about everything we do, is that it's got to be perfect, if you will, in any respect.
So what is the total case production of the two brands?
Carter hovers around probably 4,000 cases, and South Coast Winery's around 45,000. And then what we do in Texas is probably another 3,000 to 5,000 for Texas.
And how many acres planted do you have here in Temecula?
We have a total of, rough number, about 220 acres that we own and farm.
So you don't purchase any fruit, but you do sell grapes to other wineries.
We do sell fruit. We do purchase one small thing, mainly because our wine club, we have a lot of people who want a Pinot Noir, and the Pinot Noir that we grow here in Temecula is picked very early, so its chemistry is always where we want it for sparkling wine. But we don't see the region being able to handle taking it to the ripeness that we want for table. So we purchase some Pinot Noir grapes out of Santa Lucia Highlands that we bring down in a refrigerated truck and do actual crush work on and make table wine for the wine club out of Pinot Noir from Santa Lucia Highlands.
So aside from the Pinot that doesn't grow here, what are you growing here? I don't know. Can you list off all the grapes, or are there too many to list that you work with?
It's about 30 different varieties. I mean, it runs all the Bordelais varieties, known were Cab Franc, Merlot, Carmenere, Malbec, Petit Verdot. I think Petit Verdot and Malbec do exceptionally well here, as does Cab Franc. I'm not saying Merlot and Cab don't do well, but when you look at them as standalone varieties, you really get a sense that you could hang your hat on Petit Verdot if you really wanted to. We do a number of Portuguese varieties, Tinta Cal, Tinta Nero, Touriga Nacional is a big one. Of course, Rhone varieties, Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Viognier, again, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Blanc, Verdelho, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and then Tempranillo, we get in the Spanish stuff. We have Grenache and Tempranillo. I have both Portuguese and Spanish clones of these grapes. So it's a little bit of everything. And of course, any of these morph into blends, or
Right.
could be used in a rosé or, white blends, what have you.
And a myriad of sparkling wines. So I'm curious, are you 100% direct to consumer?
We are not. We're probably about 60% of our production is out of the winery, and then we have a wholesale division that is handled internally. Like I have a wholesale director, and she has a team of people who handle deliveries. And so our main focus has been Southern California. So we're probably as far north as Ventura and as far south as the border. And we cover, we've in a lot of different box stores, grocery stores, fine wine shops, and we handle all of that distribution ourselves.
So you're obviously not from California. There's a little Texas twang in there. Curious, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
First memory probably was, it's probably not a good one, and certainly one that, as a kid, my parents had, not quite sure what that jug was, but they had it in the utility room, and I got into it. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, and wound up. They came home from somewhere. I was one of these latchkey kids, kind of left to my own, and they came out home, found me laying on the floor, passed out. So that was one of those things. It didn't happen again, but my wine consumption's always been something that I had an older brother who was also involved in the wine industry, and we got involved in tasting groups early on, and just, it was always fun to be able to taste wines and get to know what was going on. And, that was back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s even, and it's something that, the wine has evolved so much from then. And so, my first memories are just, it's kind of a little bit of everything.
So in all the wines you've drunk and all the tastings you've done, I'm sure if I ask for one, you have many, but is there one aha moment that comes to mind of a really memorable wine or a memorable tasting for some reason that, made you rethink wine or rethink a grape or set you on a path, or was just the perfect setting and the perfect wine?
There's a lot of them, and certainly, for me, I think some of the aha moments One was a Tête de Cuvée that I had that was from Maison. It was from Dutz in France, and that was really what probably set me on the path to wanting to be a sparkling winemaker. Was just having a blow your socks off sparkling wine moment. And that was probably, I was in high school, and just truly had something that it was probably a $60 or $70 bottle then. It's probably now $180, $200 bottle now, but it was something that it was really one of those moments. And then I did have the opportunity to go to Portugal in the early 2000s and got to taste a number of the red wines that they were making that were now the wines in Portugal as being fortified ports and such. They'd seen a decline in how sales were internationally on this type of product at the time, and they were starting to kind of redirect some efforts into table wine production. And I had some extraordinarily beautiful red wines made from Touriga Nacional and Tinta Cow and Tinta Francesca, and it's something that really opened my eyes to being in Portugal at the time I realized the weather there was so much similar to what we see here in Temecula. Soils similar, not the same, but certainly some similarities, and just knowing that these grapes are something that we had planted in our vineyards. We were really using them for port production. And so I came back and we grafted some more Touriga, and we started using these grapes out of our port block for actual table wine production, because when we would pick them for port, they always had extraordinarily great chemistries. They were, pHs were low, they still had acid, and it was something that they were 28 to 30 bricks at that point, and you're thinking, wow, it would be fun to make wine out of these, and table wine, that is. Right. So we tackled that and have started, making, Portuguese varieties.
You're dangerous. You travel, you try wine, and then you decide to make it.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, one thing, I'm not going to Georgia. I know that. That's like, I'm not
no amphora?
I'm not going to come back and start making stuff in the ground in amphora.
Okay. Well, if we were to come to your home and go into your wine cellar or wherever you hide your wines, what would we find in there?
Ooh, not much. I'm a destructive winemaker, or wine drinker, I should say, because I like to read about wines. You hear, so-and-so, great vintage in, Loire. And so I hunt out Sancerres or some of my favorite whites. And, when I find what I'll pick 3 or 4, and then, I drink them. I really don't cellar wine just because I'm kind of destructive that way. I like to drink it, find out what it's about, and then I move on to something else. It's something that I like to learn from what's available. So, I'm always looking at things that are out there in the marketplace and, picking and choosing. So, I've got a few cases, but not a whole lot.
And of the few cases you have, are they from any particular region or any particular grape?
No, they,
where it's all bubbles?
No, I have a few. Cremant de Loire is a favorite, because I do make a sparkling Chenin Blanc for our property back in Texas, out of Texas Chenin Blanc. But I am, Kermit Lynch and K&L are a couple of crack houses as far as I'm concerned, is how I shop for wine and get a lot of stuff brought in. I order. So, I think Sancerres are a fave. Certainly, Rhone varietals and wines from Provence are favorites. Right now, I'm, probably heavy on rosés. I bought probably a case of rosés out of Kermit Lynch the other day. So,
Open anything recently, this week, last night, that drank really well?
The new 21 Domaine de Fonte, which my French is horrible, so I probably don't say it right, but the Domaine de Fonte is one of my favorites. It's just a real pretty Grenache. We had the opportunity to go to the Whispering Angel, the Chateau d'Esclans winery, and visited there and really saw, the approach to, what they were looking at is making, the rosés of distinction and things that, they're kind of beyond just the regular, what we think of as Provence rosés, but, anything that's, from the south of France. I mean, it's got to be good. Cinsault, Grenache.
Yeah, what can go wrong?
Right, Bandoles. I love a great Bandol. It's mostly Mourvedre and Grenache, but they run the gamut. I've got had a Pinot Gris rosé from a producer Roulis in I think they're in Loire. Much different, Most people don't realize Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio is a red grape, and it's very easy to make rosé out of it. It's a matter of how you handle it. It's much harder to make a white wine, I think. So,
well, with all these different grapes, the ones that you work with and the ones you like to drink, which overlap a lot, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
I think that if you are a slave to the terroir and climate aspects of whatever region you're in, if you really break it down to look at the soils, to look at the climate, you can get to that point where you say, this variety works extraordinarily well here, and that's all I want to focus on. Mm-hmm. And I would love to do that, and sometimes, I think about it, I'd love to do that. Mainly that's probably when we've got 40 different fermenters going with 30 different varieties, but it's fun for me and my team to have all the different things that we have in respect to the varieties that we work with. But yeah, I do think that if you had depending on the region, you could really fine tune to say this is what we ought to do. That monoculture type of thing, like Napa sort of seems, focused into Cabernet a lot, and some of the other Bordeaux varieties. It becomes something though that you miss a lot. You don't. Now they're starting to play with Tempranillo. I talked to a friend of mine that they had struggled with the decision to rip out an old block of Cab and put in Tempranillo, and so I was like, you're not going to regret it.
No.
I mean, Tempranillo is one of the it makes great wine, but you have to play with it and experiment to get to know what it's going to do. But
it just doesn't garner the prices that Cabernet does, which is why people seem handcuffed to the grape.
Right, yeah. And I mean, but who would think a wine from Priorat, a Carignan is going to fetch the kind of money that it does? It's something that it's just make it well and don't make too much.
Well, so then, what's your opinion as a consumer, or maybe as a winemaker, of wine critics and scores? How important are they to you?
Well, because these are aspects of the business that obviously help to sell wine. Many consumers don't trust themselves or their palate when it comes down to, here, try this, it's really good. And it's like, I need some validation here. I need to know, like, you're telling me it's good, but who are you? I need to read about it in a magazine or something. And they don't trust themselves in respect to what they taste. And I understand, a lot of it comes with the education that you get along the way through tasting. So I think wine scores, for me, I think wine competitions in respect to the, what the California fair system did, and it's interesting, when I came here in the early 80s, it was a much bigger emphasis on the fair system. Orange County Fair, LA County Fair, San Francisco International Wine Competition. These were things that, you had a select group of individuals who were everything from winemakers and restaurateurs, sommeliers, masters of wine, experts, people in wholesale, retail, etc., that were judges. And these are people who are out there in the trenches, and on a daily basis are tasting maybe 10 to 15 wines just because of what their business is. And so when you enter a competition like that and you get the validation of, you got a gold medal, it means to me a little bit more, because it was a panel of individuals tasting this wine, and a panel of individuals that have expertise, versus with magazines it's just one fellow who's tasting it, and maybe they're having a bad day and they didn't like your wine for whatever reason. I think competitions just kind of have a little bit more openness to them possibly, but it's something that it's definitely a necessity, because like I said, consumers,
it's a big world out there.
Yeah, and not everybody can taste everything. But I've had wines that are, here, this is got 94 points in Spectator, and then you try it and you're like, oh my God, what were did they taste the same wine I'm tasting? Because that's not what I'm getting, I don't see that. But, again, everybody has a different kind of palate that, things hit them in a way that you like acidity or you like, sweetness or what have you.
So your palate, red, white, or rosé?
I don't, people ask me about all the wines we do, and it's like, do you have a favorite? And it's like, these are my kids, and certainly it's a function of time and place. Daytime, hot, I tend to prefer whites and rosés. Nighttime, having some meat, it's cold, whatever, I don't know, a good red wine. It's all about, what am I eating? What am I doing that's going to select for me the wine that I'm having?
Still or sparkling?
It's always going to be sparkling if I'm, going to have just one glass of wine to die with. Yes, it's going to be a glass of champagne.
He won't pick between red wine and rosé, but he will pick between still and sparkling. I love it. So you were just mentioning, about food, and I'm wondering, how do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you think there are rules? Do you follow the old rules of white wine and fish, red wine and meat? Do you look for acid or drink what you like? I mean, you don't care.
It's, I trained in college. I was a food science major, and, food's always been a big part of my life. Mainly my mother, she was a food and nutrition professor at Texas Tech, and that's where I went to school and got my degree in food science. She was in a whole nother different department, but, we never, didn't have some sort of nutritious meal on the table growing up. I mean, my mom made sure of whatever she did, and she was one to always like to try different things cooking. She experimented in the kitchen, and so, it's something that, for me, I do think old rules about, white wine with, white meats and whatnot, they do hold true, but also it depends on the preparation. I mean, who's to say that a Beaujolais won't work with that roasted chicken you're having? I mean, it's something that, depending on how it's done, it's probably a better pairing than a white wine. Mm-hmm. And certainly sparkling fits in there. I have a huge appreciation for how sparkling wines pair, because when I came to California back in '85, the people I went to work for, John and Martha Culbertson, they had started Culbertson Winery, and that's where I came in as an assistant winemaker.
Here in Temecula?
Here, they were actually in Fallbrook. We relocated to Temecula in 1987. They built a winery here. It's now Thornton Winery, but it was always about how to pair sparkling with food. And they were big American Institute of Wine and Food people, and I think Martha worked especially hard because she was very much a chef in her own right, and she did a lot of things to pair sparkling with food. And certainly, when you have something that white wine, if a white wine works with it, a sparkling wine is just going to work that much better.
Right.
I mean, in my mind. But you can,
when in doubt,
you can always have your favorite, and if you like drinking Cabernet with your Sol Meunier, then so be it. I, would prefer a Muscadet or a Sancerre or something, but it's okay.
To each their own.
Right.
To each their own. So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste your wines yet, South Coast Winery or Carter Estate, what do you think they're missing out on?
Well, I feel Javier and I have a very classic approach to wine in respect to its regionality. Like, we know, like you talk about Bordeaux. I mean, we know good Bordeaux's. We've had, a chance to try a lot of different wines in that respect. So you kind of begin to understand the dynamic of Cab and Merlot and what's working in these types of varieties. And so we, try to look to the classics. It's like, a classic Napa Cab has a certain flavor profile to it. And I think, it's much different than a Paso Robles Cab, for sure. Accent tends to be on, more ripe and more alcohol. We tend to prefer that more classic, European model to say, do you really need to be over 14 alcohol? Do you really need to go, 42 days on the skin? Is it something that you can achieve a great wine with great drinkability through, just simple winemaking and letting the fruit talk? And so for us, I think that's the big thing, because we do have all these estate vineyards that we get to work with. We're picking optimum harvest points in our vineyards where we say this is ready to go. And we do split pick a lot of different things where we'll harvest some things early, mainly in our whites and rosés, where we're trying to look for some acidity and preserving some of the chemistry. We come back, harvest some a couple of weeks later where it's a little bit riper. You get more varietal intensity, but of course you've compromised some of your chemistry. You've lost acid. Your pHs are a little higher. But when you blend that back to the stuff you brought in early, you get this real vivacious sort of meld of the young and the old, or the riper and the less ripe, and you're able to achieve sort of, I think, a balance there. And so we're always about the balance. We recognize Javi was pretty much a food chemist as well in his major in when he was going to school in Mexico, and so we recognize that whole sugar, acid, alcohol, what that triangle is, and where the structure for a wine really needs to be within that, because you can have too much alcohol and then your wines can come across the pH could be right, but it's going to still taste hot and have a bitterness or a burn to it. So it's something where a little bit of RS sometimes it's not necessarily
a bad thing.
A bad thing.
No, not at all.
It doesn't take much.
So, with all the wines you make, if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Oh, I would probably pull out a Carter Estate Blanc de Blanc. I think that the sparklings that we do over at Carter, our prestige, represents really the finest lots of Pinot Noir and Chard that we have coming in, and it's a beautiful wine. We can pick that one. I think it's always appropriate at a celebratory moment to have some bubbles. But we make some great whites. Our Pinot Blanc and Verdelho are kind of exciting varieties that a lot of people don't know. Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc are the old tried and trues, but I definitely pick something a little different.
Yeah. Well, if you like them, then you can introduce them to other wines, but
right.
Hook them on the Blanc de Blanc, and they may never want to.
Let's see what the aliens. If they're anything like the aliens in Nope, I don't know. I don't think wine's going to satisfy.
I'm curious. You've been here for since the 80s, so you've been watching Mother Nature and the climate, and you're in a pretty consistent climate here, with variation. I'm wondering, it's kind of a twofold question. How much variation do you see in a region like Temecula? Is it a grand variation, or very small things? And also, for a winery like South Coast Winery, how much do you let the variation express itself in the wines?
Well, certainly whatever comes in out of the vineyard is, that's it for the year. We don't try to step on, our fruit too much in respect to, there's a whole plethora of things you can be adding, as far as the winemaking side is different adjuncts and chemicals, tannins, things that, they're commercially available, and some of them are good to use. Some of them, you don't really need that. But I think, as you talk about our climate, I came in '85, and I do remember it seemed like, what we're seeing more now, I feel our summers, we have a lot more monsoonal influences coming in. Like today, it's like crazy humid out there. Used to not be quite like that. We'd always have a little bit of a monsoonal, but it usually came later. It seemed like it's getting earlier and earlier every year. We're getting less and less rainfall. Last year we got just about 5 inches, and that's really about half of what we usually get. We were much more routinely 10 to 12 inches, and then you'd have one odd year where you get 7 inches, and then be back to 10 to 12 inches. And I've seen that over these past 30 years. It's steadily, gotten to where, we seem to be getting less and less rain. It gets warmer earlier. We've had strange heat spikes in May and June where, we've often hit triple digits. And, it's for a day, 2 days. It gets up, it's like 98, then it's 102, and then it gets back to our normal pattern where, our region's always kind of had, the thing about it being a warmer region. But I think part of it is that we are consistently, we start having beautiful weather by middle of March, and it's very temperate, and it stays quite nice all the way up through, really end of July, and we don't start seeing heat, into the 90s until we get into August, and
which is when you need to be out in the vineyard. So it's
but it's something that it seems like it has steadily crept up to where now we're seeing these 90-degree days in July more than we did before, and so it's something that I've seen a pattern. I've seen it change. I think our soils are still the same, but unfortunately we're relying a lot more on municipal water for irrigation. So we do have some salt issues due to just what the water is that we're getting from either Northern California or the Colorado River, and it's a function of those waters have been stepped on with chlorine and things as they've come down through the channel. So it's something that we're aware of, and it'd just be nice if we had more rain. That's all.
So just constantly adapting and everything. So in all the years you've been here, do you and Javier have any sort of good luck rituals that you do at the start of harvest? Or something personally, or something as a team that you guys do to kick off harvest? We,
we always try to just enjoy the day, have a great day. Often after work, we'll have a beer and just, go through what went right, what went wrong, and, realize that as much as this is a beverage, and it's going to be in the toilet, 2 hours after you drink it, which is, I'm very crude, but I'm just saying, you have to keep perspective on, I had an old friend who told me don't fall in love with it. And he was an old winemaker, and I've always taken that to heart because it's quite easy to fall in love with what you're doing as a product. This is one of the most romantic beverages in the world, really. And you do have to keep it in perspective that somebody out there is making it better than you, and in a region that's much more conducive to whatever it is they're making. And so, you just got to do your best and always be cognizant that, you can do better. Don't think that what you've created here is the pinnacle of anything. It's like there's better wines out there than what you've made, but just keep going for it, keep trying. And so
I love it because you beat me to my next question, which was about advice, a good piece of advice you've ever received. So, I think that's a perfect piece of advice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have you turn it around now and see if there's a piece of advice you can give to our listeners.
Well, wine is...
Because they should fall in love with wine.
They should. You should be in love with the wine you have right there in front of you. I think that, drinking wine is always, it's a pleasure. It's a treat. It's something that we probably don't think about it enough when we sit down and pop open a bottle and, you're having dinner. For me, I never have dinner really without wine. I've got to be sick or something, so it's always got to have a glass with dinner. And I think that it doesn't have to be, $100 bottle or a $40 bottle. It can be a little $5, $6 bottle of whatever. It's, there's great wines out there, and just appreciating what it took to get it, out of the field into the bottle and on a store shelf. There's a lot of hands touching, a lot of people's efforts are going into it, and just, I think thinking about that beverage is, it's, a little piece of history. Mm-hmm. It's something that, whether you're drinking something that's, a month old, a year old, 10 years old, there's some history in that. And, Javier and I always joke, about don't fall in love with it, but we often get into this where we wax poetically about, something that we're drinking, and it's fun, but we do have to keep in perspective that there's another vintage coming. Everything we're crushing today, it's going to be back, a year from now. And that's one thing I didn't really hit on when we were talking about the weather and everything, but it's interesting. We track, because on our labels often we highlight, what vineyard it came from and when it was harvested. And so, I'm always looking back, when did we pick this, when did we pick that? And, often we're within a week in most respects, year to year on any of these varieties. Like, our Pinot Grigio, today was the last bit of harvest. It's August 15th. I think last year we picked on August 12th and August 10th. It's always within a few days, right. And it's interesting to kind of watch, what that is. So,
you spend a lot of time in the cellar. You're the winemaker, and you spend a lot of time with your wine, with your grapes once they've come in, and you make them into wine, or they make themselves into wine. I'm curious what sort of relationship you have with them. Is it common to talk to the wine? Do you play music for your wine? Do you feel that the wine responds to you, or are you more reacting to it? It's interesting. I think I've heard of, guys playing music in their cellars, and, I think I'm probably a little bit too much of a scientist to realize that, the yeast are doing their thing, and, you provide for them in a way that they need to be, in a healthy place. Yeah. Clean environment, nutrition in the juice needs to be where it needs to be. I mean, there's things that you follow to make sure you have happy yeast, and keeping the temperatures right in the tanks. Those are all things that we rely on that, and we do follow numbers, and we taste our wines, and I guess we kind of talk to them, but in the end, I don't know that they ever listen. So we just too independently minded.
That's it. We try to keep our fingers on the pulse of it, such that we don't walk away and think this wine's going to make itself. Right. I never am one to say, I'll just put it in the tank and it'll be fine. Right. It's like, no, you got to come back and check and run your analysis on it to understand the chemistry of it, because sometimes things taste good and taste right, but there's a lot of other things going on that may, in the end, it's not going to come out in a good way. And that's the thing for Javi and I always, is that consistency is what builds your reputation as a producer. And we've always been ones to say it's got to be, if it's not as good as last year's, it better be better. Absolutely. And that's period. So
when you're not working, what do you like to do in your free time?
I goof off a lot. I play disc golf. I enjoy going to the beach. My wife and I are, we're kind of foodies. We get a place to go out to eat. We chase down, new recommendations on stuff like that, and travel. If we can get around and go to some places, it's always fun to see what the rest of the world's doing. So.
Yeah. And did you always know you wanted to be a winemaker, or what did you want to be when you were younger? What did you think you were going to do, or did you do something else first?
Yeah, I never had that. Growing up, my father was a chemistry professor at Texas Tech, and my mom taught food nutrition. And when my dad got involved in grape growing, he decided he was going to wanted to start a winery there in Lubbock. And he started Llano Estacado, and it opened in 1976. And I was, all of 14 years old, but it was something that I'd already been pressed into service, so to speak, in the vineyard. Watching Saturday morning cartoons was never an option. It was, come on, get up, get in the truck, we're going to the vineyard, and it's like, I don't want to go to the vineyard. But it was something with, I appreciate now what I got to grow up with then, even though it wasn't as much fun then, believe me. But it's something that you understood better as you got along. And I think once I got out of college, I did, with my food science degree, interview with the likes of Kellogg's and Frito-Lay, and I kind of figured out, wow, I'm going to be stuck in a lab doing analytical work on, you're not going to get to do the cool stuff in those places until you've been there a while. And I had a friend who knew someone out here in California that was looking for harvest help, and thought this could be great, and I was going to go to work up at Schramsberg. Didn't work out. Got a job then with Culbertson down in Fallbrook, and I thought I'd, landed, couldn't have been any better. And I didn't realize what, Southern California is to Northern California. There's much different opinions of, the state. And it was something that, I'm still very happy. I'm glad I came out and couldn't think of doing anything else.
It's amazing. And I mean, to think, well, sparkling wine is what drew you to California, and in a way fortuitously why you didn't end up at Schramsberg. So when you look back at your career, not your family, but your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Well, it's something that here at South Coast, for sure, we, again, talking about emphasis on wine competitions and whatnot, and we've certainly done very well at the California State Fair, which was always one of the, top wine competitions in California, because it's all about only California wine. And, you win big at the State Fair and you become Golden State Winery of the Year. And we did that back to back in 07, 08, and it was something that, not many wineries had done that. Certainly no winery in Southern California had ever won, the State Fair stuffs. And it was, it was very rigorous judging. The fellow who ran the competition, Puchalowski, he was very much, wanting that competition to be something that the results were always going to be, the pinnacle of what was being out there in the wine industry. And so it was big for us to have won it twice, and then we won it a third time. Wow. Then we won it a fourth time. And then this year we won it a fifth time.
Well,
and,
congratulations.
Yeah, and I think, for me, that's something that no other winery in the state has won, Golden State Winery of the Year 5 times. And, that's guys from Napa, Sonoma, Santa Barbara, Paso, you name it. I mean, up and down the state. Not everybody enters, but, the big players, the big guys, it's something that you want to do well at the state fair. And
wow.
So, there's a few thousand entries, and there's probably 500 or 600 wineries that wind up showing stuff at the fair. So you're in good company, when you come away from that. So I think for me, I've won, here at South Coast, close to 4,000 odd medals, and I know my production when I was at Culbertson Thornton, we were one of the few sparkling wine producers in the state that had won as many medals as we had. Wow. So it's just something that
I'm sitting with a celebrity.
You look back on what you've done, and it's like it's nice to know. Yeah, we make wines that can compete in blind tastings.
Absolutely.
Now, have we done that well with sending them into magazines and whatnot? We send stuff in, but in the end, I think that a jury of your peers, it comes across being a little bit, more intriguing to me.
I like it. Okay, I've got a couple short answers for you. You said that you've always had a bottle of wine on your table, so I want you to complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
It's just sad. It's like so sad.
Okay. Now we're just playing some fun little games here. Imagine that we're sitting at a dining room table. We have an empty seat next to you, and we have your wines on the table. Perhaps your Blanc de Blanc is sitting there. And I'm wondering, from any walk of life, living or deceased, who do you wish you could be sharing a bottle of your wine with?
I Tom Stevenson comes to mind only because he's. I had the opportunity to judge sparkling wine with him years ago, and it was fun because he is such a sparkling wine authority. I don't know if you know the writer Tom Stevenson, but he's one. Robert Lawrence Balzer was always such a hoot. I judged wine with him for many years at the Jerry Mead wine competition, and either of those guys, they'd just be fun to talk to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, another question, another quick one. You're being sent to a desert island, outer space. Conditions are as you wish, but what 3 wines would you take with you?
Oh, I'd probably pull something from the Loire Valley that would be from Sancerre. I love Manitou Salon as a little region. I don't have, per se a favorite producer, but, certainly a great Sancerre would be something needed. I think that a great Southern French, Côte Rôtie would be in order. And then, probably have to have an Italian Sangiovese red. I left out sparkling.
I know. I was saying, where's your champagne?
I've got to have some champagne. Maybe we'll sneak in a 4th and have a Paul Roger. Winston Churchill, something of that nature.
Fair enough. So we, since I'm asking you all the fun, silly questions now, we do play a little game where we like to pair wine with music. But the idea behind that is that wine.
Clark Smith. You know Clark?
I do.
Okay. Yeah.
Wine conjures up an emotion in us, as you've been talking about, and also music does too. So based on some of the wines you make and some of the wines we've talked about, maybe you can tell me what kind of music it makes you think of or you'd want to listen to. So I want to start with the wine that we've been sipping on, which is the South Coast Winery Brut. This is a Charmant Method Pinot Noir Chardonnay sparkling wine.
Oh, I do like jangle bands, which, is kind of a genre, but, something like, the Feelies, maybe.
Okay. What about your Carter Estate Blanc de Blanc?
Oh, it's a little bit more refined, a certain amount of elegance there for sure. Maybe some Pat Metheny.
Okay. Your Verdelho.
Oh, Verdelho, a little irreverent white. It's something that, you could lean into going, full native there. Maybe have some Gypsy Kings, even though they're Spanish, I know. But.
Still, your Touriga Nacional, or Portuguese blend.
The Touriga, yeah, we do a red blend over at Carter called Penrose, which is like a little bit of all of those. But those are great. Just something that I probably would have to say, maybe some Nat King Cole, some old jazz.
You're good at this with no preparation. Okay, last one. Your Petite Syrah.
Oh, Petite Syrah, that's like that's something that it's probably like that's some 70s rock. You're probably gonna maybe some Doors. Maybe late 70s. Want some Boston, something with some good guitar riffs in it.
Love it.
Maybe some Jimi Hendrix. I don't know. You need some strumming in that.
Yeah. John, I could keep doing this, but we've been going on so long, and I think we've almost finished a bottle of sparkling wine in the process, but I'm curious.
Great.
I'm curious. What is one wine region on your bucket list that you want to go explore?
Oh, I'd love to go to New Zealand. I'd love to see New Zealand and Australia, really. And if I went, I'd go see both, because you're going to be down there. So, but I'd really, definitely. I mean, I have Italy on my list right now. We had a trip planned right during the pandemic. We were going to be there in 2020 and had to cancel. But
So you'll just rebook that one.
Yeah, that's going to happen. That's next.
Well, while you're rebooking that, someone might be wanting to book a trip to Temecula. They should.
I hope so.
Check it out. And where can they find you? How can they find you? what should they look for here at South Coast Winery or Carter Estate?
Well, Hobby and I are here most days. Certainly this time of year during the harvest, we're here every day. But we get through harvest, we go about 85, 90 days straight, and then post-harvest, we're back to our Monday through Friday regime. But yeah, look us up online, southcoastwinery.com, and come out and just, ask in the tasting room. They'll come find us.
He'll come out from his winery and come visit. And you can make a whole weekend here, or midweek, whatever. You've got, like you said, a hotel, spa, restaurant, and you're right on a row with other wineries. And Carter State is how close?
Just right across the street. I mean, it's literally, you could walk to it, but you have to cross a fairly busy road. But it's something that the valley has 35, 40 wineries now, and it's something that you could easily spend a week here if you wanted to, and really get to know the area.
Well, John, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack.
Well, thank you, Allison. It's been my pleasure.
It's been fun chatting.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.